Welcome to the growth. I'm your host King, and I'm joined by my co-host Dr. Kristen Eccleston. Apologies.
Dr. E. I mean, I have had that issue the entire time I've been married. So I always have my students either go Mrs. E or Dr. E just for that very reason.
Okay, Dr. E. So, Dr. E, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, King. How are you doing?
Doing great. I'm doing great. Looking forward to our discussion because this is definitely that's very important to me. I believe it's something that I've recently been turned on to within the last 5 years, as far as understanding that is. And I have a lot of questions, and I'm looking forward to our discussion on this. So
I am too.
Before we get started, I think that's important to play kind of what is a mindset, and then I know there's a growth and then a fixed mindset. You can kind of elaborate on those to kind of give us the context.
No, absolutely. That's a great question. And, I often have this conversation with people because having an idea of what a mindset is, especially a growth and a fixed mindset, is incredibly important. With a growth mindset, what it is this idea that you don't know everything, because nobody knows what they don't know, right? And so you're opening yourself to being open to conversations with others. You're willing to hear what people are saying. You're taking that information and really expand upon in that area of what you don't know. It's like having your knowledge capped here, but then opening yourself to listening to other people's experiences, things they've gone through, and allowing your knowledge to expand and see things in maybe a new way or differently than you once did, compared to people who have a fixed mindset who think, this is my cap of my knowledge. I know everything that I need to know. I don't need to hear other people's experiences. I don't need to expand beyond what I know. And usually those are the people that you might have a conversation with and get frustrated with because they're very like, this is my opinion, I'm not changing it, I see it my way. Those are those fixed mindset people versus those people who are looking for that I'd never thought of it that way moment and looking to really expand beyond what they currently know as per se.
Interesting. So now, as you were describing that fixed mindset individual, do you people actually consciously choose to have a fixed mindset, or just their behaviors kind of in a fixed mindset?
That's a great question. I think what happens is people with a fixed mindset don't realize they have a fixed mindset. I think in order to have a growth mindset or a growth perspective, there has to be that level of awareness that I don't know what I don't know, or that I haven't experienced every possible experience that there is in this world. And you have to be aware of that. But I think some people just aren't aware of that concept. They don't realize that it exists. And that's where that fixed mindset comes in, because they don't know that there's something beyond, or there's more, or there's other stories. They're very, I don't want to say self-centered, but for lack of a better word, self-centered. They're still just very much in tune with themselves, and not the fact that there are other people out there with other things to bring to the table that could ultimately shape or change how they might see something in the world.
Interesting. Describe the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. The first that comes to my mind, obviously, is politics, because it seems that's where people seem to be very fixed mindset with their political ideology, especially on certain issues. So my question now would be, from your experience, do you think it's possible first to have a growth mindset toward politics? It would be open-minded to get into a conversation about abortion, and then maybe saying, okay, this is what I believe before the conversation starts, which is your fixed mindset, but I'm open to growing based off the information I receive. Do you think that's actually possible?
I do think it's possible, but it goes back to, again, one, having to have that level of awareness that my knowledge base can only go so far, and I have personal biases. And I think sometimes people hear that term personal biases and think it's a negative, and it's not. everybody has personal biases. From the day you were born, you were exposed to the environment around you, and it shapes how you view, how you think, how you see things. Oftentimes, your parents unknowingly instill personal biases in you, what is known to be truth in your household. So it takes that level of awareness, again, that, okay, my knowledge is limited and I have to open myself up. And I think what can happen is people can have conversations with others where you're hearing an opinion that doesn't necessarily align with your own, but you have to be able to go, I hadn't thought of it that way before, or that's really interesting, and allow it to shape your mind. You can change. You can be open to hearing other people's perspectives, because sometimes you might have a truth that's your truth because your life circumstances, who you are as an individual, what you've been exposed to, has only led you to have a knowledge base that gives you so much information, and that's why you feel that way towards a certain topic. But once you start having a conversation with somebody else who maybe has had a different experience or a different perspective, and you truly listen to what they're saying, and you take it in and you think on it, then you're expanding your understanding of a concept. You're allowing more information to come in and reshape your brain in a way that it goes, that's a new way of thinking about it, or I didn't realize that existed, or that's a new thought, or a new way of thinking towards it, and I'm going to change my mind. I often like to tell people that listening to other people's views and experiences doesn't obligate you to have to change your mind, but what it's doing is allowing you to have more information so that you can really make an informed opinion. So you're having a different perspective, maybe something that you didn't recognize or know before, and it's allowing you to say, you know what, I stand firmly in the way that I felt even prior to this conversation. All that you did was give me more information, but it didn't change my mind. Or you've opened yourself up to this really wonderful moment where you go, I didn't know this, I didn't realize that, I'd never thought of it from that perspective before, and now it gets to reshape how you see something, maybe politically, religiously, because you hadn't been operating with that knowledge until you allowed somebody to share it with you. So I think everybody has the capability within themselves to have a growth mindset, to reshape how they see things, but you have to have a level of awareness first, and then you have to be okay with the idea that changing your mind or changing how you see things doesn't make you a hypocrite. It makes you now more informed than you previously were.
I think that's important. I think that's a very important distinction. I think so many people don't want to look at themselves as a hypocrite, that they change mind. I'm curious because, again, like I said, I just recently began to expose to this terminology of growth mindset within the last 5 years or so. So I'm curious, how long has this terminology, this mindset around growth mindset, been around? And part two to the question would be, at what point did you find yourself be interested in this particular path of study?
Those are really good questions. So I think growth mindset has been around for as long as people have been studying the brain, but it's only something that's really gained traction probably in the last 5 to 10 years. And I would say probably even mainly so in the workplace environment, and how they're trying to get employees to see or take in information. And I think too, as we started to talk more about race, culture, and different, that's also been where growth mindset has come in, because you're asking people to expand beyond what they thought to be stereotypes or basic knowledge, and really say, no, open yourself up to other people's experiences and perspectives, and really take those in account for that. So I really only think we've been recently doing that. That's kind of a newer thing. But I think growth mindset has been around for a long time. I'm a learning theorist, essentially. And so there's all sorts of different learning theories, constructivism, constructivism, but most of them are all rooted in your environment and what your environment does to expose you and make you think a certain way, or see things a certain way, or take in information a certain way. And I think that goes hand in hand with growth mindset. So I think my interest with growth mindset came in when I started to work with students with mental health needs. And then I decided to go and study that even further in the education setting. And it really all started to tie back into brain. I mean, my studies were in mind, brain, and teaching and how your brain processes information. And I see growth mindset as a way that you are processing information. You're either allowing information to come in and transform your thinking. Jack Mesro's transformation learning theory is you're allowing information to come in and transform your thinking, and it's allowing you to simply elevate your level of thinking. You're seeing something, so you have more knowledge, or you're getting information and you're immediately shutting it down. And that could be so many barriers. That could be cultural barriers, it could be religious barriers, political barriers, what your parents instilled in you as a young child of what is right and what is wrong. And so you have to really be able to have this higher level of thinking associated with it too, and kind of drown out all the noise and look at things based on facts, perceptions, and really have a level of empathy too, where you can really feel somebody else's experience or really understand somebody else's experience. And even though you didn't personally go through it, by hearing their story, you're able at least to take in those emotions a little bit and say, I would have felt this way, or that would have been hard to go through, that would have been difficult. And I think that's where people who have that fixed mindset, it's not that they lack empathy completely, but they have more difficulty in being able to really feel the feelings of somebody else, or understand the perspective, or put themselves in that other person's shoes to understand why that person may be passionate or feel a certain way towards whatever topic they're conversating on.
Now, you brought up some very interesting points in there in your answer, which brought some questions to my mind. Like, for example, would you say that the criteria for have growth mindset you have to be emotionally intelligent? So I heard empathy there a couple times where you were saying. So is that a criteria? You have to be emotionally intelligent in order to have a growth mindset?
I do think that there has to be a level of that. And that's almost another topic. I look at growth mindset and emotional intelligence as kind of being like sister topic a little bit, because they do go strongly hand in hand with one another. Because again, I feel like you can really only listen to somebody else's story and allow it to really shape your views and your thinking if you can feel that person's story. If you can say, that would have been really hard to go through, or now that I'm seeing it from that perspective, even though I didn't actually go through it, now I have a deeper understanding. I can feel that person's pain. I can understand. And that doesn't mean you have to feel it so deeply that it impacts your life or changes your life. Some people are like that. It's not a negative thing, but you have to at least have some ability to feel that person's perspective or experience, and so that it then makes you kind of feel it in your heart space a little bit and go, yeah, I never experienced that, but now that I'm hearing it that way, I can understand your pain. I can understand the frustration that you've gone through. I can understand these different experiences and why it might be more impactful to you than it was to me, because I hadn't had to think of it that way or experience that way until you brought that to my attention. So I do think emotional intelligence is something that helps somebody develop their growth mindset. I feel like they almost have to go hand in hand with one another in order for you to get that outcome that hopefully we're helping other people to understand and what is a growth mindset.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that for me, and it's the engineer in me as a person that believes that I constantly want to grow. That's one of my prayers every day, that I could better consciousness leader today than I was previously. And I've created virtues with growth as a key virtue that I look for, that I believe that I have. Mm-hmm. So with that context, what would you say is for your personal choice when it comes to building relationships, whether it's professional relationships, whether it's romantic relationships, whether it's family relationships? Do you look for a growth mindset in the individual you're about to act with? Is that important?
It's important to me because I feel like that is a basis for strong communication. I feel like in my work, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this too, I think in anybody's work, you want to connect with somebody that you feel like you can have a conversation with and they can hear you, right? There's nothing more frustrating than trying to communicate with somebody and they're not hearing you. And I often feel like when I get to be a third party objector, maybe it's when I'm supporting families with the school system and I get to kind of sit back. The disconnect is always communication. It's always this breakdown in communication that's occurring. And so I think I am looking for somebody who, in any type of personal relationship or interpersonal relationship communication skill, that has a growth mindset. Because I think as individuals, the goal in life is for us to always be growing and changing. You know, who I was at 20 isn't who I was at 40, because different life experiences and perspectives have come in and shaped me. So I have to have that right, or that ability to constantly be evolving essentially in my thinking, who I am as an individual, growing, changing. And I think what happens is people often look at that as a negative thing, that you've changed or you're different. And it doesn't have to be a negative thing. You should all be evolving. And so I am looking for somebody who has an open mindset and is willing to discuss things. I personally love conversations with people who have an opposite view of things for me. I love it. I find it stimulating. I find it interesting. I am very engaged. I want to hear somebody who goes, really, I agree, and here's all my reasons behind it. Because I'm looking for that aha moment. I'm looking for that, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. That's a new perspective. I'm looking for that moment where my mind gets to expand and go, I had never seen it that way. I've never thought of it that way. Now this is, it's changing my concept of how I viewed this situation. And so I want to be exposed to people who feel that same way, so that we're constantly having those levels of communication that are allowing us to grow, instead of us putting these walls up and feeling like you've changed your mind, or you've changed, or that's not who you used to be. Instead, the person is open to this idea of growing with you and allowing their knowledge to also expand.
As an actor as a connector, I'm always for behavior patterns, or I would say triggers, to help me determine I want to continue the conversation with this person, or I want to engage in the conversation with this person. Are there any kind of outward signs that you can look for or identify in a person to say, this person doesn't look like, this person has a fixed mindset, or is another way of saying, is there a degree to growth mindset? In other words, a person may say, hey, I'm open to having a growth mindset on my political issues, but when it comes to issues on race, I'm fixed mindset. Is it possible to have a growth mindset but fixed mindset on certain issue, or is it all in common? Either you have a growth mindset or you don't have a growth mindset?
That's a really good question. I actually think, yes, you can be open to certain topics and be very closed off to others. And I would say the ones that you're probably closed off on are ones where you have what you call your personal values, right? You have established the sense of, this is my value, and this is like a hard line for me. Like these experiences in my life have made me feel so strongly this certain way that it really doesn't matter what you say to me, because this is not just now a thought process. This has become a core value of mine. And I don't know that there is a way to say that that's a right or a wrong thing. Maybe sometimes by having what has become your core value and has created this fixed mindset, maybe sometimes it does close you off to hearing other perspectives. But sometimes your core value is also just makes up of who you are and who you are as an individual. So there's this very thin line, and it's hard to know where that line is between being completely closed off from hearing other people's perspectives, and then also just having a belief that is a core value that makes up who you are as an individual, and you set boundaries around that. Now, where I think the healthy fixed mindset versus the unhealthy fixed mindset is a mindset where You have a fixed mindset where you don't have boundaries around it. You're willing to engage in arguments with people around it. You're not willing to hear other people's perspectives. You're very closed off, and it's almost unhealthy. Like you would get yourself so worked up that you'd be willing to get in a fight or have very outward emotions towards it. Versus if you're going to have a fixed mindset that I think is your core value, then you have to also put some boundaries around it and know that this is my core value. This is a belief that I have. So I'm not going to engage in arguments with people. I'm not going to seek validation for this. I'm not going to engage in situations that I know will get me elevated or upset. And you have to know that that's who you are. And so again, it goes back to that level of emotional intelligence and knowing that what is a fixed mindset that is a core value versus where you're just closed off from hearing other people's opinions. So it's hard. It's not an easy thing. And I think that's why there's a lot of people who make books off of growth mindset, people who are speakers about it, Fortune 500 companies that hire people to come in and help people, because there is a lot of gray area in this. It's not this very clear cut definition at times.
It also seems to me that having a growth mindset can also have health benefits, right? As opposed to a fixed mindset. Not just from a kind of, you're saying, I'm not going to do things to get myself in shape. But I'm just saying from a context of from a neuroscience perspective, can you speak to some of the health fits of having a growth mindset?
So I think there's less stress associated with it. I think if you have a fixed mindset, then you're going to come up against a lot more walls in your life because you're going to run into more situations where you're not willing to open your mind and hear other people's perspectives. So you're just going to get frustrated and angry a lot because you're going to hear other people express their opinions or their views and they don't align directly with yours, then your wall is going to go up. And when your wall goes up, that's when you get frustrated. That's when you get angry. That's when you engage in arguments or you write off a friend or you create this tension versus when you're open to hearing what the other person is saying and you're listening to what the other person is saying, again, you have to change your thoughts. It doesn't mean you have to agree, but you're willing to take it in. You're looking at it objectively, like it's information for you to take in and then disseminate. Is this something that aligns with me? Is it not? But it's not evoking this powerful anger emotion. It's more of it's a thinking or an evolving or a transformation instead of having your walls up. So I do think there's some health benefits to having a growth mindset because you are not stressing yourself out. You are not creating those feelings of anger. You're more open. You're more willing to listen. And I feel like that is a lot less stressful.
Okay. Excellent. I'm thinking about the fact that in today's society, people can wear hats and teeps and everything in communities. And even though I'm going to talk about two speaks that everybody's familiar with, and how those two symbols spark debate and controversy and issues, even though, from my perspective, I don't think they are mutually different. In other words, I mean by that, for example, someone having a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, else having a Make America Great hat again, right? So again, when you see these two individuals see each other more specifically, they would think that they would have a growth mindset like your views and my views are diametrically opposed to each other. Just because society tells us, even though it's not like if I believe that Black Lives Matter, I can't want America to be great, right? It's like, in other words, choosing one. So where I'm going with that is now how as a doctor in neuroscience, how do you see people can now begin to have these two tribes they're forced to be in. Then get to where they're saying, okay, I have a growth mindset. I'm interested in hearing, what do you mean by Make America Great Again? And the other person's saying, well, I have a mindset. What do you mean by being Black Lives Matter? Why do all lives matter, right? So how do we start to bridge the conversation among those kind of groups that have where it's society says you're different and this is your tribe. You must stand in your tribe?
That's a good question. And I think it goes back to that communication piece that we talked about. There's this great diagram that I can't remember the name of it, but it essentially allows you to look at what kind of emotion is being evoked in you by hearing something that doesn't align with your thoughts. And based on that, it kind of helps you realize, do I need to ask more questions? Do I need to evaluate why somebody might be looking at it a certain way? It really kind of helps you understand, where is the emotion coming from that's making me feel so strongly that that person's view is angering me. And what's more important than that chart is the fact that when you see other people who may be on the other end of what your feelings are, what you're promoting, it comes down again to that communication piece. I feel like it's often stereotyped a party to think that if they're wearing this t-shirt or that hat, this is the only way they can possibly think towards a certain topic. And instead of asking them more questions about, what does that t-shirt mean to you? Like, give me your perspective. Like, what does this mean? You might find something that goes, no, yeah, all lives matter, but why the reason we wear the Black Lives Matter t-shirt is because those lives haven't been represented. Those lives have been underrepresented. Those are the ones that are most in peril right now. And that's just what we're trying to put a certain focus on. That's where the focus is supposed to be. And have a conversation, right? I think oftentimes we forget to do that. We just assume that if this person is wearing this t-shirt or that hat, this is how they see things. This is the only way they must see things. And it's not aligned with how I see things. So therefore we're at odds with one another. But if you actually stopped and had a conversation with the person and said, tell me more. Tell me why this is so meaningful to you that you're willing to wear it on your body. Tell me what that means to you, what it represents. How has this impacted you? What are the stories associated with you that has made you feel this way? Then maybe that's where you have that opportunity to go, I hadn't thought of it that way before. I hadn't experienced what you've experienced. And so until I understood that that was your experience or your perspective, my brain hadn't thought of it from that way before because I haven't had to go through that or I haven't had to experience it. And I'm glad you've brought that to my attention. Now, will you still run into people who you can be as open and forward with them and they go, forget it, like, I don't agree with you? Yeah, but that's going to happen. And that's going to be that difference between, is it a fixed mindset? Is it a core value? And if it's a core value, then maybe that's not your tribe and not the people you want to associate yourself with anyways. But I think ultimately where the biggest gap is coming from now is too many people actually have a growth mindset or have the capacity for a growth mindset are forgetting to communicate. They're forgetting to ask the questions to help them with that deeper understanding of why that person feels as strongly as they do. Or what is it about the movement that they're supporting that makes them feel you might find that actually you're aligned. Like once you hear that person's perspective, maybe you go, oh, well, on that, yeah, I get why you feel that way on that issue. And maybe there's broader aspects of the different movements that you're like, I don't get it from that perspective. I don't understand it from there. But at least here on these things, I can see eye to eye on why this is important to you. But you can't have that unless you communicate with the person and are willing to hear their perspective or their experience and go, I hadn't thought of it that way before. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. But we just don't do that naturally with one another for some reason.
That's true. So, as you were answering that question, then image popped in my head, and I don't think I've ever seen it, but I think it would be very interesting. Definitely put this image out there of a person wearing a bladder t-shirt, Make America Great hat on. So the person is showing that I'm open to both ideals, right? Mm-hmm. That would be a great way to go.
That would be powerful.
Right, it's powerful because people expect, like, you can't have them both all the same time, like the universe crash, right? And even not too different. I'm sure I know a lot of Black people who believe Black Lives Matter at the same time, America Great, and they might not put the again part on there, but they were great, right? So can we at least that we both working to make America great,
Yes.
Again, it's relative, but I do agree that America could be right. So I want to kind of shift the focus from personal side, at least from my perspective. That is, for me, I look for like a date, and it's important for me to have a person who has a growth mindset when I date. Like that's my first top four criteria. If number one, everything else I can work on, but I can't work around the growth mindset. So now I have in my head things that I'm gonna ask Herman if a person has a growth mindset or not. And I'm curious with your training, your experience, we recommend try to listen to us. They can ask the Herman whether a person has a growth mindset, like maybe 4 or 5 questions that you can ask.
Oh, that's so good. And I definitely want to hear what your questions are after this too, because it's funny. I don't know that I have specific questions. To me, it's all in the conversations that I'm having with somebody. I think I can tell very early on if they have a growth mindset or not, just based on talking about different topics. And you don't have to get into just, religious and politics topics, but as soon as you hit on a topic where the person might not see eye to eye with you, like maybe they have a different experience or a different viewpoint, I think right there you can tell if they have a growth mindset or not, because are they listening to you or are they just objecting and saying all the reasons why they disagree with your viewpoint? Are they, I hate to use gaslighting, but are they gaslighting you and telling you you're wrong? Are they telling you that no, that's crazy? Why do you think that way? Like, it can't be that way. Like, it's only this. And that's how I can tell if somebody has a growth mindset or not. It's not so much having a specific question, but once we have found a topic that we're maybe not 100% aligned on, how are they responding to our conversation? Are they listening to me? Are they asking me questions? Like, well, why do you feel that way? Like, what happened to you? So are they interested? Because that to me is that growth, is asking questions, listening to the person, considering what they're saying, taking it in. You can see it on their demeanor or their face. Are they considering what I'm saying? Are they evaluating it? Hi, I've never thought of it that way. Well, now that you've said that, I feel this way. Or is it just that's crazy that you think that way? Like, that's ridiculous. That can't be true. That's never going to happen. Are you getting a lot of negatives? And that is really what I'm looking for when I'm first connecting with someone, is that first time that we don't see eye to eye, how are they responding?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to hear your questions because I'm interested to know.
So I believe there's 3 main questions I could take help me discern a lot of information about people. Number 1 is where do you like to travel? Not do you like to travel, but where.
Mm-hmm.
Example, if a person says they places like to travel to Tahiti, Costa Rica, Jamaica, then for me, I think for you it's all about patient relaxing. Mm-hmm. But judging, but that just me that answer, as opposed to I like to travel anywhere because I just love the experience of cultures. Mm-hmm. That's a growth mindset, because now if you're willing to open to go to cultures, then you obviously are looking to learn new things, right? So that's the first question. The second question is going to be, what do you listen to or what do you read?
Okay.
That's based off that. That's going to tell me if they mindset. For example, where do you get your news from? So if they say, well, I watch MSNBC or I watch Fox News, right there. Now
it tells you right there, yeah.
Exactly. Or even seeing, right? Or you may say, well, I get news radio sources, so I don't watch news. That is going to give a different answer of how I perceive you as well. Especially if you just leave it at I watch MSNBC only. I watch Fox News, right? It'll be, how do you feel about serving? So if a person's kind of like, what do you mean by it? Like they haven't really thought about it, then that's there too. Now again, it's not judgments. It's just for me to get an understanding of, and I'm really a data-driven individual in everything that I do. So I want that data to understand how to communicate with you, or do I want to communicate with you? Mm-hmm. So if you're saying, well, I haven't really thought about service because I don't know how to serve, then that's a different answer. That's about service. Much I'm too consumed about what I got to do, and what I have on my agenda, and what I'm focused on, or I'm too busy, right? Yeah. And to me, that's gonna let me know that's a person that's not aligned with how I think. Like for me, service is a part of life. It's not, can't be too busy to serve, right? It's service, and I quote Muhammad Ali. He was credited saying this. I'm sure other folks have said it as well. But he said service is your for living on this planet, right? And that's how I believe service as well. So if I get a person meeting and they don't see it way, that service a burden. I gotta, that you look at something that's work, and you don't really want to do it, but you only do it because it makes me happy. We're not so, and again that's going to have a shape how I think about your particular mindset. All that being said, if a person at the end of the day is, well, listen, I'm interested in traveling to those places. I'm interested in receiving new information, sharing with me, whereas I'm open to listening to other news sources, or I like to say, don't even listen to news at all, because I really don't see any value if it's not giving you the weather, because all other news is really, in my opinion, designed to get you to act a certain way. Right? That's why they say. And then finally, the server. All that really helps me to understand if I'm dealing with a person, whether it's for a romantic reason, and that's key for me. But at the same time, for any relationship, as you say, professional, that somebody I'm looking to build with any context, a growth mindset is required.
I like that. Those are, because it's funny, and I had never thought about how you could get so much information from somebody in that way before, and I like that, because you're right. There's a lot of things that you can tell from somebody based off how they respond or what their views of the world or how they say things, and I think it's important to be aligned with anybody that you're looking to make that connection with. So thank you for growing my mindset today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, because you'd be amazed that I've come across people constantly that were born in Baltimore City, never been out of the city of Baltimore. And right there, that tells me, like, I ask you, where have you traveled to? Like, well, I've never really left Baltimore City, Wow. Out of your perspective, you're thinking very, very, very limited compared to someone that's, well, I've been around the world, right? I've been to India, I've been to China, I've been to, South America. Now you have seen a lot of different cultures. You experience a whole lot of different tastes, sounds, sights. You're gonna have a different way. And again, I'm saying one way is better. One way is better now. I mean, I don't believe I have the ability to judge someone, but it just me determine what you and I can build. Mm-hmm. And at this stage of my life, for me, everything that I do is around how can we build? What can we do to make something that didn't exist before? Your presence and my presence coming together, it should create that kind of co-creation type of thought process. Right? And now find that being that way, I could be fixed mindset in that. So that's why I was asking that question earlier. So sometimes I could be too fixed in my systematic approach to how I was like. And could that be a bad in mind?
No, I feel like in that circumstance, based off what you said, those are some of your core values. And again, that goes back to that fine line between what is a fixed mindset and what is a core value. You have core values of who you're looking for in a partner. You want them to have had certain experiences because you're looking for somebody who has a certain way of seeing the world so that you can kind of align. And it's all about interpersonal communications and relationships, right? And we're always going to have people, regardless of how open-minded we might be, there's always going to be people who are also open-minded that we're still not going to align with. We're still not going to see things their way, and they're not going to see things our way. But it all comes down to what was the communication of not seeing each other's way, right? Did we argue about it? Did we gaslight each other? Did we tell you were wrong? Were we ugly to each other about it? Or did we listen to each other and then ultimately go, I don't see it the way that you see it. So we're going to agree to disagree, right? That old adage, we'll agree to disagree type of thing. And to me, you can still have two people with growth mindsets who just aren't in alignment with one another. And that's saying you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who has a growth mindset, but is also in alignment with you, which is natural when you're looking for somebody who you want to have a relationship, right? If you met someone who had a growth mindset, but you weren't aligned, you didn't see things in some kind of familiar way, then you wouldn't have anything to connect on. So I think it's just one more level of the complexity, that it's not enough to just say, I can connect or be friends with you because you have a growth mindset. We also have to have some level of alignment in what our growth mindset is. We recognize that we don't know everything, and we can grow and we can disagree and we can have those conversations. And it doesn't mean I have to agree with you on everything, but I would say about 90% of how we see things is semi-similar to one another, because that's where our connection piece comes from. Versus it's going to be very hard to make that interpersonal or intimate connection with somebody who, even though their mindset is open, you can't find any common ground on anything. So I think that's just one more level of, you can both have an open mind, but you just don't connect.
Absolutely. Now, I want to kind of focus again, because I want to set up certain circumstances and determine how do you have a mindset in that particular area. Like, for example, parenting. Now, if you're parenting from the ages of pre-teen to teen, how do you have a growth mindset when going through so many hormonal changes? When they're learning now to become more separate from their parents, they want their identity more. So how do you have a growth mindset, or recommend a parent to have, how to operate a growth mindset during those phases?
That's a great question. I would say that comes to a concept called feeling validation. So oftentimes, and I'll give a personal example here, myself or my husband, even, we might not understand the way that our child is feeling about something. They're either really upset about it or angry about it, and you think to yourself, you're like, that's ridiculous. Like, why are we upset about this? But instead of communicating that aspect to your child and be like, that's ridiculous. Why are we upset? Why are we crying? Instead, you go, I can understand that this could be upsetting. You know, if I had been yourself in their shoes, if I had experienced it, I would be upset too. But do we want to get this upset? Is it worth it to you to be this? And you kind of talk through. So you're not taking away that validation piece of your child. You're still validating the feeling. You're saying, I can understand why you feel this way. I can see your perspective. But then you're trying to help them emotionally navigate it. But I think oftentimes what happens is, we as adults, right, our perspective as grown children, we see the world in a different way. We go, that's ridiculous. Let's get over it. This is ridiculous. But to your child is the biggest thing in their life. You know, their life experience compared to yours is not the same at that point in time. So that is their world. That is a monumental issue, disappointment, whatever, to them. That was the biggest highlight of their day or their life at that point in time. So it's a matter of validating their feelings, talking with them through their feelings, and then trying to help them understand that maybe the feeling isn't as big, or it doesn't, you know, let's look at it from a different perspective, or, you know, let's look at it this way instead. And to give a more concrete example, I'll give you one. My son is 10, and he tends to, I don't know what his thing is. He bumps his head all the time. He's always angry. And he came to me very upset that he felt like, I get hurt all the time. My life is so awful because I'm always getting hurt, and it's just me who always gets hurt. And I said to him, Colin, do you have all your front teeth? Well, yeah. And I was like, do you have the neighborhood street that you grew up in your knee for the rest of your life? No. And I go, then you're doing better than I was at 10 years old, because I had a bicycle accident in second grade, had lost all my front teeth, had gotten my knee scraped up so bad. So I try to give him a different perspective. Like, okay, you bump your head all the time, but hey, you're doing better than some people are at 10. You made it further than I did. You still have all your teeth intact. So let's look at it from that perspective instead. And I wasn't sure how he would respond, but he actually found it funny. And I think he realized that, okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought it was. So it's helping them see it from a different perspective at times.
Absolutely. And now, my next question would be, now, you talked about your experience with your child growing up yourself. how would you say having a growth mindset as you look back has helped you in your career?
In my career.
Achieve goals that you've achieved.
I think my growth mindset was something that I developed because of my career. I was a classroom teacher. I worked with all sorts of different students. I always loved working at the middle school, high school levels, so secondary, so older students, so students who had experienced some things in their lives, and some students who had experienced things that really shaped how I viewed the world. Because think about, oh my gosh, you had to go cross country on a bus by yourself in seventh grade, and you didn't have any money on you. Like impactful stories that you hear that you go, oh my God, I never had to even worry or think about that when I was in seventh grade, or that was definitely not the type of home environment I didn't deal with, and you learn things that you didn't realize were happening in the world or that people experience. So I almost feel like my growth mindset developed because of my career in education, and having to be exposed to so many students with so many different stories really starts to open your eyes to what the world looks like and what's out there in the world. So I think it developed because of my career, but that has helped me in this point in my career because it helps me understand other people's perspectives and views. Sometimes, I'm human. I get angry. I get frustrated. I don't understand why a person is being a certain way or acting a certain way. But when I can stop and say, this might be their perspective, or this might be their view, or this might be the experience that they've gone through, I tend to be a little bit more patient. Goes back to that health benefit we talked about. I tend to not be as stressed out about it. I tend to have a better understanding of, they're not being malicious, they're not being mean. This is them, and this is them because of their different experiences. So I feel like it helps me in my career because it allows me to have a little bit more tolerance and understanding for how other people's experiences in life may have led them to be who they are now, that might not necessarily align with who I am or how I like to communicate, but it helps me understand that it's not personal towards me. It's not a personal thing towards me. It's something that this person has collectively gone through that has now resulted in this is how they communicate, or this is how they see the world.
Now, getting to the top of the hour, I want to give you an opportunity to share with individuals is an assessment or certain questions. How if a person is coming to you saying, well, I believe I have a fixed mindset. I want to explore benefits of having a growth mindset. How do I determine if I do fixed mindset at first? Is there an assessment for that, or a certain set of questions I could ask? And then what do you suggest if I can now go through to develop my growth mindset?
I think the quick and easy assessment is, if I were to say something to you that you didn't disagree with, or sorry, that you agreed with, that you agreed with, you didn't agree with me, how are you going to respond? Are you immediately going to tell me I'm wrong and all the reasons why I'm wrong? Or are you going to ask me questions? Are you going to try to figure out a little bit more about why I feel the way that I do? And then sprinkled in that, are you going to share with me in a calm manner? It's interesting that you say that, because I always felt this way, or this is how I saw it, or in a very non-threatening way. And so it doesn't become a you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm going to tell you why I'm right conversation. So that right there is the easiest test to know. Do you have a fixed mindset? How do you respond to somebody when they state something that you're not in agreement with? Do you listen and ask questions, or do you just immediately go into a defensive mode of why the person is wrong? And I would say, if you're looking to develop a growth mindset, maybe you're finally aware, like, hey, maybe I haven't been as open-minded. It's not anything major you have to do. It's just a matter of the next time you're faced with a conversation where somebody is bringing a different idea or perspective to the table, ask questions. Just ask questions. And what can you tell me why? Can you tell me what happened in your life? Like, that's interesting. This is my perspective. Compare your ideas and your perspectives. Bring a little bit of your understanding to the conversation, but don't do it in a way that is not validating their feelings and is essentially telling them that they're wrong. It should be an open communication to try and learn and understand more about why a person feels the way that they do.
Okay. And is there an example of an individual that can be past and present who you say, here's an example of someone that I believe exhibits the best growth mindset.
Best growth mindset. Oh, that's a good question. I feel like so many people are coming in my mind. I'm trying to think of a solid person, but I can give you more traits than a person. Maybe someone will come to my mind as I'm describing traits, but it's somebody who isn't quick to judge. It's somebody who's listening to you and isn't immediately interjecting, even if they don't feel the same way that you do. They're asking you questions. They want to learn more about your perspective. They're allowing you to really share your opinions. And then when they are then sharing theirs and why they feel a different way, or maybe why it doesn't align with you, it's not being done in a threatening way. They're giving you their perspective. They're giving you what they've gone through or their understanding of something. And so I feel like that is the type of person who has a growth mindset. And I'm really struggling. The first person who's coming to my mind is Gandhi, but I don't know if that's the best example. I'm trying to think of somebody a little bit more contemporary. But again, it's just somebody who doesn't make you feel like your feelings are not validated. They're open to understanding your perspective and listening to your point of view and really taking it in and allowing it to shape their views of the world if it aligns with who they are as an individual.
And in our last closing minutes, is there any books that you read that people can get, or your website, material? I know that Carol DeWick has written a book, The Mindset, that a lot of people reference. So what are the books or resources you would recommend or point someone to gain this, to get more information about the growth mindset?
Oh man, there's so many things, because it doesn't necessarily have to be a book that you pick up that's called Emotional Intelligence or Growth Mindset Perspective, which those all exist. So if you really wanted to know specifically on those topics, those books exist. But I also think that there's things like I think it's like the 100-Day Happiness Challenge. There's things like Generational Trauma. It Didn't Start With You is a book. And those are all books that can help you kind of start to open up your way of thinking and how you view. Because sometimes mindset is also about perspective. And so sometimes things that help you to shift how you see things or change your perspective, instead of, oh my gosh, it's raining outside and the day is ruined, versus like, oh gosh, it's raining outside, my plants are finally going to get watered and I'm not going to have to go out there and stand there. Things that help you kind of start to shift your perspective can also be books for different mindsets. So It Didn't Start With You, and understanding maybe where some of the generational trauma or thinking that comes in is a great book to start with. And anything that just helps you kind of expand your mind and see things from somebody's different perspective. I once read Conversations with a Black Man, which was a fantastic book, because that gave me just the opportunity to see a different perspective. So opening yourself up to authors and books that maybe are topics that not necessarily align with who you are as an individual, but can allow you to see a glimpse into a different culture or a different life or a different perspective, can also expand your mindset as well.
Okay. Well, any closing thoughts you want to share with the listening audience as far as kind of put a cap conversation?
I'm excited for our future conversations, King, just about growth mindset in general. But before we close, I also want you to have the opportunity to talk about why growth mindset is so important to you, and why this is a passion of yours for people to understand.
Well, thank you for that. I would say for me that growth mindset is important to me because I challenge myself every single day to be a better person the next day than I was the previous day. I desire to grow. I desire to learn, because it's through that I see that myself. I seek mastery. That's not something I'm ever going to reach. It's a journey that I'm on, but I want the journey, and I know in order to be mastered of such growth, it's learning. I grew up Christian, for example. I'm not a Christian anymore. Kind of look at myself as more of a spiritual person, but I still read the Bible. And I remember in the Bible, there's a passage of scripture that talks about fertile. That when your mind is fertile, then you allow seeds to grow in your mind, Of course, things can grow from it. So I believe in having that fertile soil by getting information and always looking to learn. And as I learn and grow, I realize I'm becoming a better person to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I know where I was, to your point, when I was in my 20s, how I thought, again, when I was in my 30s, how I thought when I was in my 40s, now that I'm in my 50s. And I'm happy with the growth that I have along that maturity continuum that I've experienced throughout my life. That's why growth mindset is important to me. And like I said, you asked me what was the most important quality I was looking for from an individual, let's say romantic part. In my 20s, it had definitely been physical. I mean, physical attributes. Now it's, are you a growth mindset? Are you a good person? And then physical falls down to number 10 because, I've learned that it changes. So what's physical attracted to me now might not necessarily be attracted to me in 10 years, but your growth mindset, your spirit, and your conscious will still be attracted in 10, 15 years. So that's why I can look for what I'm building.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for your time and being on the show. And I look forward to the infinite possibilities that our conversations as we can continue the growth perspective of looking at how we can really begin to examine how, because I really believe everyone can, and that's now my new questions I'm asking everyone. What are you committed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can commit to a growth mindset, I believe it would change everything. And not overnight, but we are just gradually begin to start to grow differently, living differently, and operate differently. So for me, that's what I believe will be my dream and a hope that comes from the Growth Perspective podcast.
I mirror that. I agree. I want us to be able to have conversations where people can see and learn and grow and hopefully have those aha moments that shape how they view and see the world.
So do I. And listen, audience, thank you all for listening to our first episode of Growth Perspective. And we hope you'll tune in every Monday, every other day. We're going to have at 10 a.m. and look to the website. We're going to be sending out around the growthperspective.com. Follow us on Facebook, these social media sites out. We'd love to get your perspective on how to provide more information to help grow your perspective. Again, thank you for your time.